Welcome.
Welcome.
Number 2.
Number 2.
We're in the studio.
And we're together.
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful thing.
We're actually doing a little collab somehow.
It's our first collab. And, gentlemen, very, very nice to allow us to use his little recording studio here. Certainly, I learned something today. Number 1, my favorite Dave, tech guru, does not know how to do Control-C, Control-V to copy-paste on a Mac.
That's a fucking lie.
Well, now he's hurting our algorithm too, so...
damn, the first 30 seconds.
I know, right?
No, it's over.
Already ruined. It's ruined. It's ruined. Literally, our entire career as podcasters is over as we know it.
No, but this video will for sure be demonetized.
Super concerning.
Super concerning. No, but seriously, jetzt rettet mir Swiss German for Now We're Talking. Go check it out. I will actually be a guest on the podcast right after this recording. I've not watched it myself yet, but I saw some bits and pieces and it looked really funny.
That is if you speak Swiss German, which might make it slightly difficult for a lot of our listeners. But hey, alas, he was kind enough to hook us up with this sweet setup and make sure that we've got everything working and operational here. And I think as we roll out, you and I will probably pick up elements to be able to record in such high quality. But yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Speaking of that, we got some really exciting feedback from our zero audience followers club. Is that how we call it?
I think so.
Okay, fair enough. And they mentioned that it was my audio quality was not good enough. Obviously, your video quality was shit. So we thought, why not use the studio right now and fix these problems later on?
Yeah, I have spent an exorbitant amount of money in getting a new webcam, which I have just learned is now absolutely worthless. Everybody listening to this, because we're going to upgrade to a DSLR, and everything should be good thereafter. But until then, you'll have to deal with just this haphazard quality, and I know no one is tuning in for, well, either one of our mugs.
Speaking of bad quality, I know how it looks with all these cables there. Like, can you fix that? Make it look at least...
there we go. Are you happy now, Dave?
Yes.
Are you happy?
Should
I get close like this?
Yes, and then another feedback that we got was like, it should be a little bit more structured, which we obviously didn't follow so far in the first few minutes, but we can work with that, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, this is really just a project. And actually, Dave, why don't you go into like the genesis of this? Because literally I was in the gym trying to work out. You were annoying the shit out of me. And you came up with this idea. What was the whole genesis of you, after years of being an entrepreneur, being like, you know what? You know what the world needs is another 30-something white guys podcast. What?
Waspy. Very waspy podcast. Yeah, no, seriously. The reason was, so you were in the gym and I was at home talking to you, as I did quite a lot of times in the past. And we talked for, I don't know, maybe an hour or so. And our good friend, Florian, was listening to what I was talking to you about. And he's like, dude, that sounds really interesting. Like, I would love to hear more. And we were kind of like, I mean, why, if we're anyway talking every week for an hour, why not just record it, put it out there, and annoy more people with our talks and our stupid wisdom?
I am always up for annoying a greater audience.
Mm-hmm.
Finding that leverage.
It's kind of like annoying people at scale.
Yeah, it's quite impressive.
Uh-huh. Well, do you have anything to add? Is there another reason why we're doing it?
Well, I think another reason was you had just come back from UFC, and you went. You had the full-on VIP experience, which I saw from the behind-the-scenes footage was absolutely fantastic. You and Flo got the trip of a lifetime, and you really recognize that behind the scenes, a lot of these guys were actually quite introverted, which was in stark contrast to their in-arena performances, or that kind of persona that the character that they utilized in the ring. And if they were able to do that, how come you couldn't? And I think, as someone who certainly has probably made his fair share of cold calls, has had his fair share of meetings that didn't go well, it's really interesting the areas that we decide for no apparent reason, with no data, that we're not good at. And we just have this kind of unnecessary fear attached to it. And I think really one of the things that you wanted to attack was public speaking or something to that effect.
That's not really it was not public speaking, but you're absolutely right. It's literally my crippling anxiety from social media. I have no problem. I was just 1 week ago today, I was talking to a master's class, right? Graduate students, I don't know, 30, 40 people I know in a room. And I held a presentation for 2 hours and I felt really at home. It was a nice experience. I loved it. I've been talking in front of 200 people in the past. Never had any issues with that, not nervous or anything. But I am struggling so hard putting anything out there on social media because I'm so afraid of people that I don't see, like keyboard warriors, people that I don't see, that I cannot engage with, that are just plainly mean. That scares the shit out of me. And that was really another whole reason on why I want to start this endeavor.
What about that makes you scared? Because I think that's an interesting component. Because you're some guy who walks the walk, talks the talk. Like, you've been there and done that in the business world. Why are you worried about a potential keyboard warrior, a nobody, right? Like, the only thing they have is a profile picture that's set to private. They've got like 2 followers. It's like a picture of their like 97 Toyota Camry that's like beat up and, I don't know. Like,
Not the Subaru WRX.
Exactly. And, they're hating on you for an idea. And I think, at least for me, and go into your own issues with social media, but what I'm finding is I hold my opinions very strongly until contrary evidence comes about. And I think it's, what's the best way to say it? Strong opinions, loosely held. And what I mean by that is, if other data comes in, like, we're freely available to change our minds. The issue is people tend to view content and they don't view all of your content, right? So they don't get to see an evolution. They see a snapshot of you. And one of my issues with putting anything out on the interwebs, because, by the way, the internet never forgets, which is a beautiful and a horrible thing. You get to be wrong, and you have to be wrong, because it is the sign of actually being intelligent, that you over time have evolved and you have potentially changed your opinion with new things that come out. But unfortunately, someone's going to look at your video from like 10 years ago and be like, oh my God, why did you have this opinion that's so stupid? Yeah, the question
that didn't age well.
Yeah, that didn't age well. Well, cool. Like, we are in fact human. We do in fact make mistakes. I made the mistake of getting lost, even getting over here in my own little canton here. But is that the element that you fear the most, or is it just criticism in general?
First of all, let's close that window real quick.
Yeah,
because I'm hearing a lot of kids crying, and that's not us. It's not us. It's really has nothing to do with us. Thank you so much. Good thing Brent is so tall. I could not reach it. Thank you so much. So, coming back to your question, what it is that I'm not afraid of criticism at all. No, I love criticism. I that's also what I asked every single person that I sent out the podcast to, is what was like, please tell me what I could improve. I didn't ask for for approval or anything, which we also received some, very few. But it was really about like, please give me feedback, constructive feedback, criticism. I embrace that. I love it. It's a very simple way of making sure that you're improving, I think. I loved always the quote where it says like, Like the feeling of achievement is the most dangerous poison of them all, and the only antidote is to ask yourself every evening, what can be done better tomorrow? I heard that when I was 18 or something, and I always loved it. I think it's good to be criticized. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's just the way I feel when I don't see somebody. When it's kind of like getting sucker punched, It's okay if you get, I don't know. I mean, it's generally not okay if you get into a fight, but if you brawl with somebody, maybe in a controlled setup or something, and it's kind of fair, that's okay. But this being sucker punched by somebody who's not willing to put their face out there just scares me.
Do you see any element of you even paying attention to it, giving those people way more power than they should necessarily have? Because, I don't know, sticks and stones may break their bones, but words will never hurt me. But we all know words can hurt. Words are some of the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
But here we are. The reason you've been successful, continue to be successful, is because you have opinions which are not widely held. Because if you did the exact same thing that everyone else was doing, by definition, you would be right at the median.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that you're not.
Well, in a lot of areas, I'm way below median.
Also true.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, I was never afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of failing. I'm not afraid of, like, the podcast not being successful. That's not even the goal. The goal is to fight my own anxiety, to have some fun times with you, talk, and if it inspires somebody out there, or also what we discussed last time with investing and, like, helping people with their entrepreneurism, that's a win for me, And if we can change one, if one person enjoys it, I'm willing to continue for a long time,
I will say my girlfriend didn't hate it. And as someone who listens,
that's a win.
As someone who listens to an insane amount of me talking aimlessly, number one, she said she hadn't heard most of those stories before. And number two, she said it wasn't annoying. So I feel like check on both of those things.
Could also mean that you made up a lot of stories.
Also true, but I promise you, dear listeners, I did not. But hold on, let's continue on that thread. Is there other areas of your life where you do the amazing thing that I think it was Tim Ferriss who really set this up in his TED Talk called fear setting, which is
fear selling?
Fear setting.
Oh, setting. Okay.
So rather than goal setting, right? Where goal setting is, I want to make X amount of money. Here is the milestone points. Here's all the things that could go right. Here's all the things that could go wrong. And with fear setting, and please somebody jump in if I'm wildly wrong on this in the comments. But fear setting is you actually go there and say, well, what's the worst that could happen? And can I deal with that outcome? Let's say, for example, if you do this, your net worth gets wiped out. You might say, you know what? The podcast might not be worth the overall gain. But if the worst thing possible is an anonymous human on the internet takes 10 seconds out of his existence to write a mean comment, and then he completely forgets about it, and then I completely forget about it, I'm not going to remember it even when I go to bed that night. If that's the worst thing that happens, maybe I should just try it, because I can handle that amount of downside. And I think generally entrepreneurs, we make these calculations in our head all the time about a million different decisions throughout the day. And we can get into decision fatigue and all of these things that absolutely plague me. And I know I've got to get much better at it from a productivity standpoint. But it's so interesting how in business you can be so calculated. You can understand the risk and reward to every single situation you're in. But when it comes to another element of your life, you don't use very similar mental models. And I think that's one thing, at least as I started dabbling in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you start actually asking yourself those questions like, why do I think that? Why am I anxious? What is this feeling? What's going through my head? Is it rational? Is it not rational? Then you start to leverage those other models And then it kind of opens up this entire world to you.
I like the point you're making. What about generally confidence in a certain area? What do you think? Like, how does confidence play into your any kind of methodology you would use in any kind of circumstance? Do you think confidence in that specific area plays a role or is a factor?
That's a super interesting question. And I would love to talk about it, just like I like to talk about any of my opinions.
And he has a lot of them.
I have a lot of opinions, by the way. A lot. Huge amount. I think confidence is one of those things, and David Goggins uses the cookie jar reference, right? Where you got to do something where you push yourself past a certain limit that allows you to be like really happy about yourself and the effort you put in and kind of what the outcome was. And you get to put a cookie in the cookie jar. So the next time that you're scared, you can always look back at that cookie jar and look back at your achievements. And I think a lot of people don't do that. I think a lot of people look at themselves and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to be horrible at it. But we all learn to walk, right? And we all learn to walk by crawling first. And we all learn to, whatever. And we all go through these graduated steps of failing, learning, and then up leveling. And certainly it's no different in anything that you start, whether it's business, whether it's at the gym, whether it's with a new diet, whether it's becoming a parent for the first time. Everything you do in life, and yeah, you can get into that one. I can't. I've got 2 cats, and by the way, that was a hell of a learning experience for me.
That triggered something right now. I was like, oh, yeah, please.
But I really think people should look at an element of their life where they feel like they are reasonably competent. It could be athletics. It could be playing an instrument. It could be drawing. It can be absolutely anything. And look back at, and being honest with yourself, you didn't get there overnight. You may have had a general, proclivity or an inclination to be better at something, but you didn't start out where you are today. And recognizing that you got to do the grunt work. You got to suck for a while. I mean, one of the things that I often tell people is one of the most transformative experiences in my life as a self-proclaimed non-runner was running an ultramarathon. And it's not like, oh my God, you ran an ultramarathon. Look at me, like, rah, rah. I honestly had no idea if I could complete it. I could look to other people and I can say, okay, a reasonable number of other humans have actually done this. Okay, check the box. It's humanly possible. It's humanly possible. How do those people do it? Okay, here's the kind of the training protocols that they have, and there's different methods here and there, but generally, 50, 80% of the people do this. Okay, cool. How long did they take for that? All right, between 6 and 12 months. Okay. Well, me being me, I was like, how did the guy do it in 3 months? And then I went with that program because we don't do anything in normal scale. And I did it. And I went through so many roller coaster like emotions of ups and downs throughout that 20-hour period of running this, that I came out a completely different person on the other side. And something that was seemingly incomprehensible to me 4 months ago became a reality just through looking at it at the lens of, is it humanly possible? And if it's humanly possible, what did those people actually do to get there? And how long did it take for them to get there? Just so I had a reasonable basis. And then I just started sucking every single day that I ran. I was such a horrible runner. I had no idea technique and all the gear and this and that. And you stumble and then you learn and then you learn a little bit more. And it's just this, compounding nature of learning, that one little thing keeps stacking up. And before you know it, you're at your end goal. And I think that's the way that confidence works in just every single element. Like, you want to get good at cold calls? Make 1,000 cold calls. I had a conversation with one of my girlfriend's friends who was looking to become a journalist. And she's like, oh, I need to go to master's school. I need to do all these things. I need all of these other authority figures to come in and tell me what to do. And I think that's the exact wrong way to look at these things. I said, well, how often do you write? And she looked at me with this face that was like in shock. And she's like, well, not that much. And I'm like, but you want to be a writer, right? You want to be a journalist. You want, like, there is literally nothing stopping you today from doing the thing that you want to do. It might not be on the scale. It might not have the audience or the reach that you want. But just like how we're starting this podcast, the only thing that stopped us was just literally getting a login to Riverside. That is the only thing between us and launching stuff.
Shouldn't have said that to Riverside. We can't monetize that.
Can't monetize that.
You're selling out for free, dude.
Losing all of those free advertising dollars.
We're using Riverside.
We are using Riverside. Fantastic product, by the way, if you're looking to start something. But reasonably, most people sit there and they think 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 and they plan and I do agree there is a reasonable amount of planning that I think most people should do. But in my discussions and as it relates to business, because I think that's the thing most of us have in common, most people just never get effing started.
Yeah.
And just dive in. Just dive in head first. You will learn more in the first 2 weeks of just messing things up. And then once you start learning, once you start watching the YouTube videos, once you start reading about it, that's when all of that stuff starts to make sense. Economics to me, from I did great in my exams and this and that, but it never really made sense until I started to get data series myself and actually modeling with them and seeing these relationships work and then understanding kind of how those things all fit together. And I actually after having a real application for them, that's when I really started to love them. And I started learning and I started doing all the reading that I probably should have been doing in college instead of drinking. But alas, here we are.
Yeah, maybe, doing all the drinking also taught you confidence in social situations, which is something that a lot of people neglect. They think you can just put in all the work at the office, but then your coworker, he goes out with the right guy, and he drinks the beer with the right guy, and he gets to know people, and he builds that network. And I always like to point out that in my opinion, there's 3 things in life that will make you really successful. This is not empirical data backed. This is just me.
Is this an N of 1 or maybe an N of 10?
It is 3.
3, okay.
It's 3 things. Or you mean an N of what?
In terms of what is our population of this study?
It's a freaking huge. It's probably about 8 people.
Okay,
massive samples.
Definitely representative.
No, but I think it makes sense. I always think of first you're born, right? And as you're born, there's certain genetics, but there's also support network, your upbringing, your education, how much love do you get, and there's a lot of cognitive stuff going on, right? And you build your cognitive ability throughout your first years in the womb and so on. Actually, if you're really interested, one of the best books I've ever read is Brain Rules for Baby. Okay. It's about a neurologist that describes exactly how the cognitive ability of a child is created in the womb and afterwards, and what is most important. And the summary of the book is kind of if you want your child to be highly intelligent and emotionally stable and everything, just go home, love your wife, love your husband, love your child, be there, support. That was his and kind of suggestion.
So it's not putting some Mozart headphones on the baby's womb.
That's what I want to say. No, it's not Mozart, and he brings that up. It's not Mozart.
Okay.
During the the pregnancy. I mean, I think that's one of the things that will be very important for your success in your life. And there's not much you can do about that because that is given to you. The second thing and the third thing are the 2 things that you can influence. The second thing is knowledge, right? And that is up to you. How much knowledge do you want to put into that brain of yours? Nobody keeps it from you in most countries, in most situations. There's always different situations. But we, in our society, in our culture, we have access to a lot of knowledge. And you can either go and drink during your college, or you can use your time and study hard, right? So you decide that factor. And the third one ties back into the drinking. It's your network, right? maybe drinking is the way you build your network. Maybe it's going to events. Maybe it's going listening to podcasts and writing and reaching and doing out to people and doing cold calls. It doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with. But I think these are the three pillars that I identified for success. Is and that is all before actually starting your business. And then as you start, there's all the just grind, just grinding is going to be the most important thing. Putting yourself out there and fail, and try to fail as fast as possible. Do not hang on to situations where you're just like miserable and you just try to make something work that doesn't work. Just look at it, be like, that failed. That's okay. Now, why did it fail? Right? Analyze it.
I think you need to break that one down a little bit, though, because I think
failure.
No, not the failure. I'm really good at failure. How you actually identify a point in which you need to pivot and change strategy, or if you need to like make an adjustment. So let's say you've made 1,000 cold calls and I don't know, you've only had 10 people respond, which you've assumed is very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. So how do you know if cold calling is wrong or if your strategy for cold calling is wrong? And I think that's something where a lot of people who just are not proficient at what they are attempting to do are like, why am I not performing higher with this? Cold calling doesn't work. It's dead.
No, could be, right? But it's maybe not.
It's probably not. Probably not. I mean, I think one of the things that we all look at in our businesses is what are the companies who are doing 10, 100, 1,000x sales that we're doing? What do their people do? Do they still employ this tactic? And I would argue I still get cold calls.
I most certainly do.
I still get cold outreach from email. I get people.
Mail. Dude, I get mail. In the US, I get a lot of mail. Just simply like mail. USPS. Mail. I'm like, it actually gets more attention than my email. Because email, too much. Calls, too many, right? USPS mail? I don't know.
Have you actually bought anything that was ever mailed to you?
I received a letter from Chase, and I had an issue with my banking that very week because I couldn't wire some money internationally to another country, and they were like, "Oh, come to Chase," and I was kind of like, "Why not?" But honestly, it's rather rare because I think, and that's another thing. Like I think cold calls do work, but you got to be good at it. And
absolutely.
And that is my tip always. And it is the most cringe tip that you can give to anybody. And everybody will tell you that is not relevant or anything or not true. But fucking smile.
Yeah. It's not a cringe tip though.
It is because it's kind of, it is stated in every freaking book you'll ever read. And it seems like it's just what everybody says, but hell, I am smiling whenever I'm on the phone with anybody because I want them to do what I want them to do, right? And I'm smiling and you can hear that. My wife feels better in our home when I'm smiling on the phone because it makes just the mood in the house better because I talk nicer.
Do you remember what the breakdown is in terms of like verbal communication? What percent is the words? What percent?
Yeah, right. It was like 10% is the word or something.
10% is the words.
40%
is the tone.
Yeah,
and the remainder.
I think it's also like when you see somebody,
when you see someone's body language.
Doesn't really. It works here in the podcast, right? It might be like okay, but on the phone it's kind of like.
But on the phone, I would definitely say your tone, your speed. All of this stuff plays into your energy, which ultimately like humans pick up on.
But coming back to what you actually asked, right, is kind of like, how do you figure out if the process is wrong, if the product is wrong, if your approach is wrong, whatever, like, how do you figure that out? That's an interesting question because most likely you would talk to I would talk to peers, but I'm very human focused. So like I love to just figure out how are other people doing and ask them, and then cut away the bullshit, because oftentimes, especially in sales, people will just tell you how great they are, right? And they will not tell you about the grind. They'll overstate a little bit, how much revenue they're making, how many sales they make, and but I mean, you should get an idea. If But would you, me personally, I would say if you make 1,000 calls and you get 10 hot leads immediately, that's not too bad. Maybe you get 900, 800 people that will just hang up on you. You get maybe 100 people who are interested and you can follow up. You maybe get 90 that really seem to be clearly interested, and you are probably going to be able to get an appointment, in 10 where you immediately get an appointment because they need what you're trying to talk to them. I think that would be pretty successful. But I'm maybe an outlier, but maybe I'm really bad at it, And I also haven't done it for that long, because I immediately started using my network to build out sales. Like I had a startup and I told every single customer, like, hey, we need more customers. Like, you see, we're really good. We put in the work. If you could just recommend, make 1 or 2 recommendations, intros, whatever, I'd love that. And that worked best for me. Better than cold calls. For sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think your best customer is the one that you already have. So improving that client experience. I think one thing I would add to that is ask early. Ask that question within like the honeymoon phase with the client. It's probably the time. It shouldn't necessarily be the case, but let's be honest, this is the case in most circumstances. When you're in the honeymoon phase with your client, call it the first 3 to 6 months of an engagement, if you have a multi-year engagement with them, that's the time when your service is going to be the most prompt. They're hopefully not going to have a huge history of negative experiences with you. In which case, when you fire off that question, do you know anybody else who you could recommend us to? Everything that they can say about you is entirely positive. Versus if you come with that same question in 2 years, there might be some slight reason for hesitation. And that's something that I think has definitely transformed the business that I run, is asking for that recommendation early, much earlier in the process than I would have.
What I always like to do is I love reciprocity, right? And so I'd like to have something that I can do for the customer before I make a request like that, right? Because I mean, all the studies show, right? Like there's this good book by Robert Cialdini or something. I think it's called Influence, and he's quoting a study where 2 people were participating in a study to do something, but that was actually just fake. One person in there was the person who's the subject of the study. The other one was like working the study, right? And they kind of like had them do stuff together on a table, as they while they were doing it, one guy as they're done, when they were done with the study and they walk out, the participant of the study is being asked a question by the other person, like, hey, would you like to buy some lottery tickets or something from me? And the amount of people who said yes, let's say, is 10%, right? Now, in the second group, what they did is the person who was doing the study would walk out of the room, and even though he wasn't asked, would bring back like 2 sodas, gave one to the other person, who is the subject of the study. And as they walk out, they asked for if they would buy some lottery tickets, and it was like 4 times higher or something crazy like that, right? Like, people feel obliged to just give you something back when you do something for them. So that's something I always try to do with all my customers. I always try to make sure that I have something like in my back pocket where I was really nice to them. As an example, what I often did was like, I didn't certain services I didn't charge, just small things where that it would be really grateful for. Let's say, like, they would call me on a Saturday and they had like an urgent thing, and I would solve it for them. Maybe it was like half an hour task, and I wouldn't charge it to them. And so if they would later on come up with either an issue that they had, I would kind of put that into the discussion, not
subtly,
very subtly. Or I would ask for a favor and be like, hey, like after I did that for them and they were very grateful, I would ask that would be a good point in time where I would ask for an introduction or something. And I think the success rate with something like that is way higher than, and you can do that even after the honeymoon phase, because there's a real ask, and it has like this reciprocity between
Yeah, I
what
think
you
it's
just
always
did.
important to be able, especially with new engagements, to before you even sign the agreement, before you do the whatever, you know exactly, especially like in a consulting type or professional service type environment, know what the quick win is before you even sign. So, like, I don't know, if you're raising money for somebody, like that's probably the most applicable example for me. Know that you can get 2 meetings on the calendar within 2 days of signing.
Mhm.
Because because they're probably in a circumstance where they've been, trying to do this themselves. They're banging their head into the wall. They can't do anything. And then all of a sudden they sign with you and boop, boop, and all of a sudden they're talking with two of their ideal investors, and it makes them feel good in their decision, everything else. And I completely agree. I think reciprocity is huge. I think asking early is huge, knowing that it's on your side. Um, yeah. But there is something I want to dig into a little bit deeper.
What is that?
I just thought about it. So
That you're not even visible anymore. I
I'm not
like
even
that.
visible. I am out
Just
of the screen, going out of the screen.
yes.
I think it's super important. When you're just starting, go get a wide knowledge base, listen to a bunch of things, but please just start. But as soon as you start, if you run into trouble, honestly, your first stop should be YouTube or Google. And like, we literally have the world's most amazing database of people who either have nothing better to do or people who have been there and done that, who are willing for free to put all of their education in one spot that you can then just search and go to and listen to. And I don't need to learn sales from some random guy who's just has whatever. I might be able to look at like the VP of VMware or,
Yes.
some massive company and hear about exactly what their sales strategy is from a conference. And then all of a sudden, because I've done the work, because I've failed, each one of the things that they're talking about will mean infinitely more to you. So I don't, these people, and by the way, this was me, I used to just read every book on the topic, like every book on business. I was just all over the place. And I think now if I was to go back, I would have had infinitely better results to just dive into the work, do the thing I didn't want to do, and then hyper refine that skill with YouTube or with other knowledge sources that help me refine that one skill set. And then once I had honed that through doing more work and more iterations and more failing and more building, then you can go on to the next skill set that you're looking to improve. I think a lot of people get into analysis paralysis because they just feel like they need to know everything all at once when you don't. You need to know just a little bit of accounting to be dangerous. You need to know just a little bit of sales to be 20, 50, 100% better than the guy who never reads anything. It's the same thing with marketing, same thing with whatever. But pick the area where after your high level view, you're like, you know what? This is really what I want to improve. And then only read about that.
Yeah, and then really apply something like the Pareto principle, right? Where you're just willing to, with the first few hours that you put in, you just get exponentially better, right? And that you can apply that really, really well, I think, in a situation like that. And just being like, I love to learn from other people. That's my kind of jam. Like, I love to listen to people who just have done things and just are, I don't know, maybe they talk about how they failed or they just explain something. I'm really I'm not a big fan of anything fiction. I love just generally nonfiction books.
Shocking.
Yeah. Well, I also have a condition that's called aphantasia, maybe a topic for a different time, where I don't have a mind's eye. Let's not dig into that right now.
We're definitely
No,
gonna dig into
let's dig into that. Maybe. Okay. Keep watching episode 3. Dave explains whatever.
Dave explains his mental disorders.
Yeah, all of them in the next, let's say, episode 3 through 55. We'll dissect them. But I was really interested in nonfiction books generally always, but then I really noticed I love talking to professors at my study, at university. Just like have a beer with them, talk to them, listen to them.
That's super interesting because I hate professors.
See, I had a really interesting guy when I did that talk at the graduate program a week ago in San Francisco. There's a guy who asked me like, "Oh, what do you think, like, about studying in the U.S. versus studying in Europe? Wow, is it better if you study at like Stanford or something rather than like in Zurich, maybe at ETH or something?" And I was like, first of all, I personally think that whoever your professor is, he's probably infinite amount of times more knowledgeable in whatever topic he's teaching than you will ever be. And so it's more, you will not reach his ceiling most likely, or her ceiling. And so it's more about how you engage with them, if they are obviously interesting and maybe they also had their own companies or whatever. But it's just like dig into it, dig into the human mind of the person in front of you. And I've been doing that ever since I was a little boy. Like I remember one time we had a policeman over at our house, and I came home and I was probably around 18 years old, and I came home and I was high. I smoked a bunch of weed before. Now it's out there. I did that as a young boy. No, I don't care, but I was really high and the guy was there, and I was like over challenged a little bit in the situation. And then I started asking him questions about his job, what he's doing, and so on. And I remember that even in that situation, I did it. And I've been doing it always. I've been doing it before. I'm still doing it. I love talking to you. That's why I love talking to you for an hour every week, because you have a certain kind of skill set, right? And you bring experience and knowledge and all these things. And I am learning. That's all I do.
The only caveat I would place on that, and I will say I absolutely adored some of my college professors. And I feel very blessed that I was able to go to university, and I know that's not an option for a lot of people. And for those people that's not an option, again, YouTube. I think it's the greatest learning platform. You just kind of have to know how to sift through stuff, but it plays into the same element. I only adored those professors that had a professional background before they went to academia. And the reason is...
Or during. Right, you can be a professor and start,
I think it's very rare to find that. I think, at least when I was in school, people were either just full-on academics, or they had a career somewhere else, and then they went into academia. Now I think you find a lot more, much more of like the Socratic method, whereby you actually have practitioners coming in and teaching, much like yourself, how you kind of gave a guest lecture. But I'm very hesitant to ask the marketing teacher of whatever, like Porter's 5 Forces, like...
Stop. Like, we're not talking marketing here. We're really not going to start marketing, because I'm very opinionated on marketing and I'll shit all over it.
Perfect. Which is my whole point.
Yeah, I know. That's why I don't want to get into it, because I think it's like the most fraudulent business department in any company.
100% agree. So let's go to...
Maybe you should talk about it.
Let's go into accounting. Like, anyone... like
they invented being fraudulent.
Oh, absolutely. It's the reason I still use the teeth whitening, whatever shit, even though it doesn't work. But if you look at like accounting, I don't want the guy who just knows like what a balance sheet, income statement, and statement of cash flows is. I want a guy who knows how to make those sing to tell the numbers that I want to tell within my company.
Yeah.
And I find that people who have not been in those situations, like, it's one of my biggest issues with most of the toy hounds here in Switzerland, or accountants in Switzerland. Anyone can tally up my expenses and this and that, but how do I actually leverage the tax code to my benefit?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's very, very difficult to find someone who's like, oh, you should pay yourself in dividends, not via salary. And this is this.
Well, you can ask me.
I can definitely ask you, and we will
I
definitely
agree.
get to this. But people who understand the rules of the game and how to navigate the rules of the game, we're not talking about doing anything illegal, but is there a more optimized way of doing things? And I find it's only the practitioners
Yes.
who are able to really dive into what is the most important element of what you should learn. But it also plays into, listen, you need to know the rules before you can understand how to break.
I completely agree. And it also ties back into what you said before, right? When you start a company, you'll learn an infinite amount more than after, like, you'll learn so much more just starting your company than you have probably in 4 years of studying.
Absolutely.
Right? Like tax law as an example, I had that during my bachelor's of science at tax law. I couldn't tell you a single thing about it, but once I have my company, now I can tell you certain things that are obviously within the legal framework that will make it a little bit better for you, you know? And the same goes with like, all kinds of different situations where it's not just sales, it's also getting very opinionated about marketing, but it's tech stack, it's just how to run a company or just how to talk to employees. I had HR at university, and I'm kind of like, what? First of all, I hate the term human resource because I think resources are something else than humans. But I think we're getting away from that, but it doesn't really matter. It's just like, I think there's so much more to learn if you just do it yourself.
Could not agree more, because it is also what, again, cost and benefit. When you're in school and you're like learning about taxes, you're like, I'm broke. What does it matter?
Yeah.
And then the day that you start turning a profit, and the difference between you turning a profit and being broke again is the tax rules. All of a sudden, you get hyper focused on, can I take this deduction? Can I take that? Can I write off my car? What's allowed? This, that, the other. And how do I start shifting these things around to better optimize my situation? Especially when you are someone who is in control of the company. For a lot of people who are not entrepreneurs, they don't have this availability. But hey, there are ways, and I think it's becoming incredibly more popular, is larger companies are hiring freelance people via their contracting entities.
Yes.
And they're getting 1, 2, 3, 5-year contracts to do the same job that they would have had to sit, but now they've got a little bit more autonomy. They still have deliverables. They still have to check with people. But hey, if they want a better health insurance plan, they can get it. They're earning 30, 40, 50% more because the company's doing the quick math that, hey, if I pay a person $100K, the real cost of hiring them with your favorite term, human resourcing, is probably 1.5, maybe even 2.2, depending on the level of the hire in terms of additional benefits and sick time and leave. And
maybe you had a headhunter who got him,
Right.
and then all these additional costs and then his workplace and his computer, and then the amount of IT support he needs that he might not need, because he's not within your system, or that he just needs to pay for himself, whatever. It's just all these little things, and they rack up.
They rack up
massively.
so high.
But it also kind of brings me back into like one thing that we talked about last time, right? What I would really like to see come out of this podcast is a few people who feel encouraged to start their own company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And last time we were talking a little bit about, what if we put both some money in and then see whose business is doing better? And off camera, we discussed this, and we figured, like, what if we put our competitive side that we have with each other aside a little bit and focus more on what can we do together, right? And we discussed that. Like, what if we were to start something together, figure out a nice project and start something?
Right. And I think the genesis of this idea was kind of having some user submission for ideas. We would potentially invest a small amount of money in them in a seed round, and then, kind of mentor them through this process. We're not fully involved on the idea, because I think it might be something that either Dave and I start, and then we grow it on camera for you and kind of walk you through the iterations, because I think we come at many things the same, but also many things from completely different angles. So we're definitely going to have some good headbutting to hash out on camera. But also, I think we're also completely open to hearing what other people want to start and helping them in that journey. And really, dedicating quite a few episodes into what that growth process looks like and documenting it because, well, a lot of it isn't sexy. 99% of it is not sexy stuff. Everyone wants to see the Instagram highlight reel, but no one wants to see the actual behind the scenes. How do you even collect a payment? Where is that payment going to? How is that structured?
And how do you hire people for certain tasks that you should just not engage yourself in, right? Like,
How do you know?
There's so many platforms these days, and really starting a company is really, really easy. And that's what I would really like to, what I would like to achieve with that is that we make it so that people feel encouraged to start their own company because they see also how easy it is if you put in the work. What I think for our podcast, kind of like my future vision would be something around the lines of we pick a project. This maybe the first time we just pick one, we invest, we show what we've been doing off screen and how many hours we invested, who has been doing what, and kind of like how we grow it, who did we hire to do certain things with the money that we invested. But in the midterm, I would love to have like more, like, so that like our zero audience can also submit their own projects that they would like to see mentored or funded by us. And maybe the coolest thing I could imagine is if we would actually set it up in the form of a fund where the people that listen could also invest. But first, I think we should build a track record on the podcast so they see, they know what they're doing. And it shouldn't be about us asking for money. It should more be about like participating in a fun environment.
I completely agree. But if anyone wants to give us $100 million to invest, we won't say no.
Yes, we'll do that too.
All right. I think we've pretty much run out of time. Mm-hmm. So with that, thank you everybody for listening in. Please tell us. All feedback is welcome, especially to Dave. All critical,
especially if it's like if you're a very anonymous person and you just shit all over me.
Please
actually no. You know what? Do it. Fucking do it.
All right.
Because there's no better way of me getting outside of my comfort zone, right?
Yeah. There's no better way.
Yeah.
Dive right in.
Thank you very much.
Take care, good people.
Have a good one. Bye. We're way early. We're only at 52 minutes.